I don't do it often, but if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I am decked out in a Giants jersey and a Giants hat. Why am I doing that? Because I am that excited about the news today that the Giants have promoted arguably their top position player prospect. You could get a case for Marco Luciano, certainly, but Casey Schmitt is coming to the big leagues, and he's probably going to be in the starting lineup tonight.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already. And please hit that subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube. And coming up on today's show, yes, we're going to get into yesterday's embarrassing, beyond frustrating, kind of humiliating loss to the Washington Nationals that had me ticked off. So we will get to that. But the lead story, there's just no doubt, is not that. It's that the Giants have promoted Casey Schmitt. And this is a big deal for so many different reasons. The first thing that I want to say is that this is going to be the first position player drafted by this quote-unquote new front office that's now been here, hasn't quite been 5 years, hired in the at the end of the 2018 season. So it's been a long time. So the 2019 draft, 2020 draft, 21 draft, 22 draft. So 4 draft classes, and now we're finally seeing the first position player to make it to the major leagues with the Giants. The first pitcher was Cole Waits, and he debuted with the Giants last September. And so when we talk about the front office and Farhan Zaidi, and for me personally saying give them like more time, and a lot of the moves around the margins that they've made have been good. You look at Estrada, Yastrzemski, Wade, JD Davis, some of the pitcher signings, Gosman, Rodon, DeSclafani, Wood, they've had a lot of success there, but where they have not yet had success is through their farm system. And it's been, it takes time. Some guys move quicker than others, and they haven't had guys move quickly. But for Schmitt, he was a 2020 draft pick, so not even from that original 2019 draft. But anyway, getting to Schmitt, he is being called up. And the reason for the timing, to me, if you listen to yesterday's show, I actually clipped it out, and I could post it on Twitter, but I decided not to just because whatever. But I said that I thought that Casey Schmitt may be an option right now to get called up, and simply because Brandon Crawford is on the injured list, Thairo Estrada has been playing shortstop, and I personally haven't really liked what I've seen from Thairo Estrada at shortstop. I think he's a guy who can fill in there if needed, but he's not a guy you really want playing every day at shortstop. And the defensive metrics this year back that up. I'm not just relying on the defensive metrics. I've been watching every inning of every game, and he's just made some mistakes that he kind of can't make up for. Like when you kind of, bobble the ball a little bit at second base, you have time to recover and throw a guy out. But at short, and he's got a good arm in a sense, but it's also not really a shortstop's arm. And so anyway, the numbers on Estrada this year so far, -4 defensive runs saved and -3 outs above average at shortstop, but above average advanced metrics at second. And that's, again, what I've seen with my eyes. And so for Casey Schmitt, he was originally drafted as a third baseman. Last year when Marco Luciano got hurt in High-A Eugene, Casey Schmitt filled in at shortstop. And what we saw was that he did basically more than an adequate job. He was impressive at shortstop. And so coming into spring training, they're like, we want to get more looks at of Casey Schmitt at shortstop, and they did. He played there in spring several times, and then now in AAA, where he's been all season, he's split his time originally between like every other day, third and short, and then recently started playing second base as well. So the versatility, and he is just known, scouts call him one of the best defensive players in the minor leagues, one of the best defensive prospects the Giants have ever had. And so, yeah, there you go. And so for me, not that I see him play every day. I don't watch these minor league games all that often sometimes, but I'm certainly not watching every day. So I can't give you like a full evaluation of what to expect defensively at shortstop from Casey Schmitt. But what I do expect is that, especially with a left-hander on the mound today for the Nationals and Patrick Corbin, a guy who actually has been decent over his last handful of starts, but over the last several years has been like literally the worst pitcher in the game. And he's left-handed. Schmidt is right-handed. Platoon advantage. It's just like the perfect spot for Schmidt to debut. And I expect that he will be the starting shortstop tonight. And you slide Estrada back over to his most comfortable position. You keep JD just dingers, just defense Davis at third. And Lamont, lefty on the mound. So not Lamont, probably Flores at first base. And you're looking at the debut of Casey Schmitt. And so it's not all just defense, though. Offense, he's not just like a guy who is known for his defense, but don't expect anything from the bat. It's, to the contrary, I think there's a lot of hope and optimism about what he has the potential to do with the bat. But defense is the more we have a lot more confidence in the defense translating. The bat, he's got something to prove there. But as we're going to talk about in just a minute, he started off kind of slowly this season in AAA offensively, but over the last week, he's really turned it on. So we're going to look at the numbers before and after the most, recent hot streak for Casey Schmitt, and why the way he's played over the last week warranted this move being made. And we're also going to get into what is his role going to be? Is he just filling in until Brandon Crawford gets back, or is it going to be more of a permanent thing? Is he going to be platooned, etc.? So a lot more to get into about Casey Schmitt. And yes, we'll adequately criticize the Giants for how they performed last night. But before we get into all of that, I want you to know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Look, I'm no NBA expert. I know the Warriors had a very disappointing loss last night, and so they're obviously going to be heavy underdogs in the series, down 3-1. But what I'm looking at today when I look at FanDuel, the Giants are heavily favored to win this game. So I don't love, they're so favored that I just don't love the odds there. But what I do like are some of the odds to hit a home run. Mitch Haniger at plus 420. Wilmer Flores at plus 540. Flores, I think his last two at-bats have resulted in homers. Actually, no, because he started did he start last night? Anyway, I kind of like Flores at plus 540 to hit a home run. But Haniger, I could see it as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking at over at FanDuel as I glance across it today. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action and MLB action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, as promised, Casey Schmitt talk continues on Locked On Giants as we discuss his role, as we discuss why he's getting called up from an offensive standpoint. Just so much more to get into. And then, yes, yesterday's embarrassing loss to the Nationals that had me frustrated as just to no end. I think a lot of people probably weren't watching because the Warriors were also playing. Thankfully for the Giants, because, man, was it an ugly game against a team that they need to take advantage of. And frankly, they've not played well against teams that they need to be taking advantage of. The Giants play the Nationals again tonight at 6:45 Pacific. Casey Schmitt making his Major League debut. What else do you need to know to turn into this game? Catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. And thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow we'll be breaking down this game. Logan Webb versus Patrick Corbin with Casey Schmitt making his ML debut. It's going to be a can't-miss episode tomorrow. So I want to discuss the numbers that got Casey Schmitt here offensively, because we all knew, like, defensively, he was Major League ready to start the year. But what they wanted to see was, I mean, literally, very specifically, Farhan Zaidi said, we basically want him to face right-handed breaking balls, and because you can kind of get exploited if you're a little bit swing happy, if you're not disciplined enough, and you just show, if at the Major League level, if right-handed pitchers figure out that you will just swing at, breaking pitches, i.e. curveballs, sliders, out of the zone, in the dirt, off the plate, away, they will just throw it to no end, and you're just going to have a hard time. And so they wanted to see him kind of figure that out. And so it's really interesting to look at his numbers over a couple of spans here. So basically, before and after April 30th. So April 30th was not long ago, just over a week ago. So the much larger sample is the before April 30th, and let's look at that first. He had a 65 weighted runs created plus, which means by league average standards in the Pacific Coast League, he was about 35% below average. His walk rate was small at only 3.6%. It took him a long time to even draw one walk. It was like 77 plate appearances or something, and he still hadn't drawn a walk. And during this time, he had a 21.4% strikeout rate. That is not too bad. We've seen guys like David Villar and Gary Sanchez and Joey Bart have strikeout rates near 30% in the minor leagues in AAA. And so only that's like a positive out of this line, but overall 35% below average offense, that's certainly not a positive. But since April 30th, Casey Schmitt has suddenly hit 357 with a 455 on base and a 536 slugging. It's a 144 weighted runs created plus, meaning 44% above average production for the Pacific Coast League. And perhaps most importantly, during that stretch, a 12.1% walk rate and a 12.1% strikeout rate. And I don't have the exact number of plate appearances, but again, this is just over a week, so it is not a large sample, but still, that's what they were looking for. And they got it, and as soon as they got it, and as soon as, like I mentioned, with Estrada not playing great defensively at short, and Crawford on the injured list, it was just like, why the heck not? This is the time. He's hot. Let's call him up and see what he can do. And it's like a soft landing spot with Patrick Corbin, a lefty who's, like I said, been one of the worst pitchers in the game over the last several years combined on the mound. And so what is his role going to be? Is he going to be sent down the moment Crawford returns, which is he's eligible to return from the injured list tomorrow, Wednesday. And so I don't know exactly. You think about Elliot Ramos and the treatment that Elliot Ramos has received, in that he's come up and only face left-handed pitching. As he's a right-handed hitter. They're platooning him. It's called the short side of the platoon because there are fewer left-handed pitchers, and he was only facing left-handed pitchers. So, if you're a left-handed hitter and you're in a platoon, at least you're getting more playing time. And for Schmitt, he's the same as Ramos, a right-handed hitter. And so if you're platooning him and he's only facing lefties, and the other thing about Ramos is that they just, they'll call him up and they'll give him some looks against some lefties. But as soon as they run out of a string of left-handed starters, they'll send him right down. But to me, that's more a reflection of kind of them not really believing in Ramos. Whereas, and again, the point about Casey Schmitt was drafted and developed by this front office. Elliot Ramos was not. Joey Bart was not. And so I'm not saying they pick and choose favorites based on that, but I am saying I think that they probably believe more in Casey Schmitt because he has more of what they were looking for, which is why they drafted him. And so, it remains to be seen. It is entirely possible that this is just a short-term thing for now. But now that he's on the 40-man roster, he is going to play this season, health permitting. Whether it's a short term for now and then he gets sent down, he'll be called back up at some point. Like as soon as there's an injury anywhere, like at third or at short or at second, because he's shown that he's capable of playing all of those positions. And not to mention, I think that we may just see him stick, even if Brandon Crawford returns, because prior to the season, I mean, there was a lot of talk that they were going to be really careful with Brandon Crawford this year and give him like the 2021 Buster Posey treatment, which was 2 days on, 1 day off. And what we've also seen is David VR has really struggled. And so it would be kind of a simple transaction to just keep Casey Schmitt on the roster and option David VR, where frankly, he needs to play because right now he's just sitting on the bench and not playing because he's not performing well and because they're not facing a lot of lefties. But I think that like this solves it. Kind of just a lot of things are solved at once here if you keep Casey Schmitt on the roster, because it allows you to give Brandon Crawford more rest, which he keeps going on the injured list the last couple of years after being super durable for a long time. He's suddenly going on the IL quite a bit recently. And so this would allow you to just give him days off, let Casey Schmitt play short, let Thairo Estrada, who's having a monster offensive season, stay at the position where he is the best at, in terms of his own personal skill. It's his best position. And, David VR, because of the play of JD Davis, has kind of lost a role. And his role was like starting at second base against left-handed pitching. But suddenly, if Casey Schmitt is starting at shortstop against left-handed pitching, and that puts Estrada back at shortstop against left-handed pitching, then where does David VR even play? I guess maybe first base, but you've also got a guy like Wilmer Flores who can take on that position. And so I think that I think maybe the most likely thing, if Crawford comes off the IL tomorrow or whatever, is that David VR gets sent to AAA. I'm not sure I already said this, but he needs to play. And so sending him to AAA isn't like a death sentence for David VR and his chances of ever being a quality major leaguer. It's like, I think it might just be for the best for the San Francisco Giants and also for David VR to go down there and get everyday playing time and get his groove back. And then, injuries happen and whatever. And so he'd probably be needed again at some point throughout the season. So that's kind of how I see it playing out. It wouldn't shock me if they send Schmitt down after like 2 days. It also there's not a clear just everyday immediate role. When we talk about a platoon, I think you're going to see maybe a mixture of Crawford and Schmitt at shortstop, but it's also like 2 days on, 1 day off at most for Crawford. And so that becomes plenty of opportunities for Schmitt. This is the last year of Crawford's contract. Crawford himself has not performed great defensively. And so if you just prove that you're the better player at short, or there's an injury somewhere else or whatever, there's so many different avenues into which Casey Schmitt could establish himself as just not a platoon player. Even if he starts out in a platoon, please don't panic and send me a bunch of tweets about it, because that would not be the long-term thing. A guy with his kind of defense, that's why Brandon Crawford typically doesn't get platooned, is because he faces lefties because they value his defense enough that they're willing to live with not having the platoon advantage in the lineup because of what he's brought on defense. But the defense looks to be in some decline. And so and again, it's the last year of his contract, so they got to figure out a solution at short. And it very well could be Casey Schmitt, and that era does start tonight. We'll see how the career goes, but today is day one, and it is an exciting day at that. So coming up in just a minute, we will get gloomy. We will discuss the Giants' embarrassing, frustrating, these aren't even strong enough words to describe what the Giants did last night in just a ugly loss against the Nationals. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But before we do, all right, as promised, we'll dwell a little bit on last night's loss to the Washington Nationals, a team, coming into this series. I'm talking about how you have to take advantage of a team like this, how I thought they would take advantage of a team like this, and you're facing a rookie pitcher making his second major league start, and you've got Tony DeSclafani on the mound, who's been arguably your best pitcher this season, and what happens? Well, the Giants got shut down. I mean, that's the most aggravating part to me, is the offense got shut down by another just kind of rando, right? Like, they just have a history of performing. It's like, oh, the Giants have never seen this guy before. Oh, he doesn't have great minor league numbers. Oh, he's not a top prospect. Oh, he's throwing 7 shutout innings against the Giants. And it's kind of like unacceptable. It's extremely frustrating. And they need to wake the heck up. Like, I don't know what it is that's causing this. I'm sure they're trying their best, but their best just wasn't good enough last night offensively. But we'll kind of break down how in some ways it's hard to blame certain guys, because the guys who hurt them have been like their best players all season. By the way, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow you're going to hear us breaking down Logan Webb on the mound and Casey Schmitt making his major league debut, so you're not going to want to miss it. The Giants play the Nationals tonight at 6:45 Pacific. Catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So, yeah, I mean, it was an ugly loss. It was an extremely frustrating loss. Sometimes I'm optimistic on the show, but like in reality, I can get really, really frustrated watching the San Francisco Giants play games like what we saw last night, where this Nationals pitcher, Irvin, I don't even know his first name because he's so new to the league that I like the headline here, Irvin shows poise, goes long for first MLB win. It's just borderline like unacceptable. If you want to be a playoff team, you just can't be letting this happen on multiple occasions. Like, yeah, maybe it happens once or twice a year where something fluky like this happens, but the Giants have a history of this. Like, it happened in Detroit earlier this year. And speaking of Detroit, the Giants have now played the Royals, the Tigers, the Marlins, and one game against the Nationals, and they're 2-7 against those teams that have a combined run differential of like minus 200. And so it's just not good enough. And the Giants are 15-19. If they could simply be, instead of 2-7, like even 4-5 or 5-4, like their record would be 500 or better. And so you just gotta take advantage when these types of teams come into town. But on the flip side, to be fair, the guys who kind of cost them this game, Tony DeSclafani had just a miserable first inning in which he allowed, 7 hits? 7 hits in the first inning. I think he hadn't allowed 7 hits in a game all year, and he allowed 7 in the first. And 5 runs in that first. They were 1 out away from getting out of it with just 1 run scored, but it was just hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. And, he ended up going 7 innings and no more runs allowed the rest of the game. So he really settled in, and it's hard for me to get too upset with the guy who has been their most reliable and kind of clutch pitcher this season. And so you just kind of chalk it up to, he was due for a little regression, but did it have to come all at once? It did. But what can you do? And then if we look at the Giants had a lot of base runners. They only struck out 6 times. It's not like they had a high strikeout game. They walked 3 times. They had 6 hits. So they had some base runners. They at least had 1 hit by pitch, I believe. But the double play was a big factor. And who hit into the double plays? Tyro Estrada, J.D. Davis, Jock Peterson, and Michael Conforto. And so I know Michael Conforto's struggles have become really pronounced and acute. And like Patrick Corbin on the mound tonight, lefty, I would not be surprised if Conforto is out of the lineup. He might be a guy who needs a day or 2 or 3 off, seriously, just to kind of reset his mind. This is a good hitter, but he is seriously in a major funk right now and just really, really in a deep slump. But like JD Davis, Tyro Estrada, and Jock Peterson. Jock Peterson, by the way, also had been in a slump, hitting a lot of balls on the ground. Swing doesn't look quite right. I wonder if that wrist is still bothering him. But then, of course, in a non-clutch situation in the ninth inning with nobody on base, he hit a home run. Whereas the last several days, he's come up with base runners all over the place, and he's done nothing but strike out and ground into double plays. And so, look, I'm not like down on Jock Peterson permanently, but it's been a rough stretch for him outside of the meaningless home run that he hit in the ninth. But like, okay, JD Davis and Tyro Estrada hit into double plays in key situations with guys on base. I mean, what am I going to do? Just rip Tyro Estrada and JD Davis, who have been among the best players in the league to start the season? Conforto, yes, the double play kind of amplifies his struggles, but the rest of the three, it's hard to get too upset. And so, yes, while it was an embarrassing loss, the guys who kind of hurt them the most have been some of their best players this year. But, and then, so yeah, it was ugly. It was frustrating. I was upset about this. It was just really frustrating to watch. However, it's a 3-game series, and it's all, to me, like baseball, just win series. If you win series consistently, you're going to have a good year. 2 out of 3 is a 667 winning percentage, which translates to a whole bunch of wins. I'm going to actually calculate that for you right now. 667 times 162 is 108 wins. And so if you can just, obviously you're not going to win every series. The Giants have already lost plenty of series, but a winning recipe is win series. And so, yes, they lost the first game, but that doesn't mean they can't win the next 2. And so you take it one game at a time. Tonight, you've got a huge advantage with Webb against Patrick Corbin. And so you hope to just forget about yesterday, take advantage of today. By the way, one more reason Casey Schmitt getting called up, Logan Webb, an extreme ground ball pitcher. And so to have your best defense out there, Estrada at his best position, Schmidt being at shortstop, doing what he can do, JD Davis looking great defensively this year. So that's a factor too for why today was the day for Schmidt. And so you try to win today's game, and then if so, the series is tied at 1, and then you go for the series win, which would be 3 straight series wins. And so that's still on the table, but you've got to take care of business tonight and tomorrow, and we'll see. Anyway, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, we're going to be breaking down what we see out of Logan Webb and the Giants. An important game for me. This is an important series. I said it before the series, but one game doesn't define a series. It's a 3-game series. So important game will give them a chance to win the series. Catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast. Giants play the Nationals at 6:45 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of that hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. I cannot wait to be with you again tomorrow. Enjoy the game tonight. Enjoy watching Casey Schmitt, who he has the potential to be a real difference maker, something we haven't seen for a long time coming through the Giants system. No guarantees, but of all the guys who have come through recently, he might have the best potential. And so looking forward to that debut. So I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.